In this video, I'm going to share with you how I make my miniature applique pillows with this layered effect. These are going to be 6-inch mini pillows, so we're going to cut 7-inch squares of the fabric we're going to be using for the liner and the outer fabric. You can use whatever fabrics you like that coordinate with your decor. I like to use a lot of neutrals. I feel like it goes with everything. Sometimes I like to use plaids or checks. And one of my favorite fabrics to work with is burlap. This is just some scrap fabric that I'm using as the liner. You will also need to pick out your design that you're going to be using for the applique. For example, I'm using this angel. I just hand drew the angel and I made the body separate and 3 different styles of wings. I'm going to be using some of these tags that I previously made. This is one of my favorite products to use for sewing, especially with applique. It's an ultra hold of the heat and bond, and it comes in a variety of different holds, but this one's my favorite because I really like it to stick, and it's also meant to use where you don't necessarily have to sew. And I've already adhered some to several different fabrics. This one I'm going to be using a bit of fusible interfacing in between just because it's a stretchy knit and it's a bit thin and I don't want it to be really see-through. Another reason why I like the Ultra Hold is because I tend to use a lot of thicker fabrics like these upholstery ones you're seeing here, or really thick stretchy knits. And if you're using a thin cotton, you might want to use one of the lesser holds. When you're ironing it to the back of your fabric, make sure you don't go over. You don't want to melt the glue to your ironing board or your ironing mat. And I'm using this wool ironing mat on my desk, which I really love and recommend, especially when working in a small space. I really like using these thick upholstery fabrics and dense fabrics because they do add a lot of texture and dimension to your project. They also pair well with thinner cottons and other fabrics like that. The heat and bond is really great because it has that paper backing and you can just lay your applique pieces out, trace around them, and cut them out. And play around with different fabrics that are coordinating, even if you wanted to do mismatch, and layer them for a textured effect. And you want to follow the instructions on the package. Start by getting your iron heated up and gluing them down to your fabrics in the layers. Now, because these are very thick upholstery style of fabrics, when you put the iron on the front, it doesn't really heat it up enough to melt the glue. So you turn it over and heat from the side of the other fabric. However, though, you want to make sure that you're not shifting the applique around. For these angel appliques, I was playing around with several different fabrics. And I'm going to iron the wings first, and then I'm going to iron the body over that. And after I iron those 2 pieces on, I'm going to just rough cut off a piece of the fabric and sort of trace cut around the applique. If you wanted to, you could use a pencil or chalk to draw an outline to help you, but it's pretty easy if you just eyeball it with your scissors and do about a 1/4 inch allowance around. I'm cutting through 2 pieces of that cotton Osnaburg, and it's not glued together or stitched or anything, but it holds together pretty well. Just move it carefully and don't shift it around. If you really wanted to, you could put a pin through it. Now, a few years ago, I came up with this technique of layering the cotton underneath. I originally used one layer, and I found that 2 layers worked much better because I'm making it just an overhang of sort of a frayed edge. And when you have just the one piece, it can thin out when the strings pull or it frays. And so 2 layers of the cotton fabric underneath makes for a fluffier applique look. So here's something else I like to do with appliques. I like to add lots of embellishments. I feel like it just makes it special, and it's a great way to use up little ribbons and doodads that you've been saving for a special project. I like thick lace ribbons, thin ones. You can see I'm using some gold ones and jute twine bows. Also, on that angel, I added some faux fur wings I cut out instead of the ironed on ones. And the faux fur ones are very thick, so they don't go behind the body. Now, after you have all of your applique chosen and cut out, you're going to sew it to the little squares. If you'd like to, ahead of time, you can pre-sew your liner to your outer fabric. So we have a 6-inch square of a liner fabric, a 7-inch square, sorry, of a liner fabric as well as an outer fabric. And the reason you want to line them is because it reduces bulk and lumps. Also, the reason why you cut 7-inch square for a 6-inch pillow is for a seam allowance around the side when you're sewing them together. Another fabric I like to use is drop cloth, and I love to use it in a variety of fabrics. And I decided to make some of these little cross ones and use some drop cloth behind some of the pieces here. And you can see I'm doing the same process where I'm going to adhere it and then I'm going to cut the background fabric out in 2 layers. But instead of using something like the cotton Osnaburg, I'm using drop cloth. And the same process as the other applique example, just cut around with a seam allowance and slowly move it around your work surface until you get a little bit of an overhang for a layered effect as desired. And after it's sewn on to your pillow at the end, you can trim off extra stray fibers, or you can thin it out a little bit more. Now, a little different example with these crosses is that I sewed them together before I sewed them to the main fabric. And when I'm using the drop cloth, you can just line it with the drop cloth as well. It's very inexpensive. And a little tip here is to put a dab or so of hot glue just to hold the applique in place. And this is okay to do because this is purely a decorative miniature pillow. It's not something that's going to be going through the washing machine or anything like that. And it's sort of like pinning it in place, but you don't want to put hot glue where you're going to be sewing through with your needle. Also, something I forgot to mention sooner, it is very important that you sew with a heavy duty needle on your sewing machine. One that is heavy duty or one that is meant for jeans. If you use a thin needle, especially with thick fabrics like this, it will break or bend. And the other thing is that I really mostly only sew with the straight stitch, and I sew on the slowest speed setting on my machine. The next step is pinning your 7-inch squares together, and you should have your liner fabrics layered with your outer fabrics in the middle. And you're going to pin around the corners, and I like to pin on the edges as well so there's no shifting during sewing, especially with these thicker fabrics. And pin in the direction that you can pull them out as you're sewing because it is a small miniature pillow you're working with. And leave a gap, an opening for turning the pillow right side out. So we have our heavy duty needle in our machine, and this time for the outer edge we're going to stitch on a medium speed with a straight stitch, and carefully pull your pins out as you sew around your square, and don't forget to leave an opening for turning right side out. After you've sewn your squares together, you're going to take and clip the corners like this. And do not cut the threads, don't clip too close in. You're just trimming away a small amount, and it reduces the bulk in the corner when you turn the pillow right side out, and it makes it a nicer squared corner. Turning the pillow right side out takes a little bit of time, and you just have to work slowly with it and don't give up. Don't get frustrated. It is a small opening and you're squeezing a bulk of fabric through it. Once you get a little breakaway, it's like magic and you're almost there. And I like to take this bone folder. They have ones that are specially for pillow making and sewing. And you take it and you poke the corners nice and square. I also do not trim the corners to reduce the bulk on fabrics like burlap that I use the serger or do a zigzag stitch around the edge because you don't want the corners to fray. I also don't do it to the faux furs. And we're getting close to the end of the project. This step is where we are going to be stuffing the miniature pillows. I like to use polyfill, which is a polyester fiber fill. And I order it and buy it in bulk. You can buy it at a fabric or craft store. And you're going to stuff in the little pillow and get it shoved in the corners really, really well. And stuff it to your liking. You can put a lot and make it really dense. It makes it a lot more round of a pillow the more batting that you're stuffing in there. Or you can kind of stuff it lightly or loosely. And you can use a variety of materials to stuff it with, like leftover scrap fabrics, other fillings, bean bags, stuff, things like that. And finally, after you have your miniature pillow stuffed, you're going to sew together the opening. And you can sew it however you want. I like to use an invisible stitch, and you just go back and forth like a ladder. And when you pull it shut, you can't see the stitching very much. It's kind of hidden. But you can tack it together however you like. I used to use the sewing machine and just sew across the bottom. After the pillow is all sewn together, I like to give it a good squish around like that and try to flatten it out a bit so it doesn't look so round and bulky, and it helps to even out any lumps. And if you have any sort of flyaway fibers, you can give them a trimming, or you can even, like these ones, I trimmed down the heart a bit of the cotton backing. You can see the variety of styles that I came up with for these ones. I love this burlap with the gold threading through it. And the hearts, some of them I have laces layered over cotton. These are upholstery fabrics with layers of lace ribbons. And some of these cross ones I aligned around with a lacy ribbon trim. And those are on burlap, but they're upcycled from coffee bean sacks. I like this teddy bear fabric. It's sort of a Sherpa. And I thought that one was like really cute where I added that bit of lace. It's a vintage lace. This is one of my favorites where it's the faux fur with the cross applique and the cross is made sort of a chunky look with the layering of laces, and then I put a gold ribbon trim throughout. This one, I actually made that applique from the gold ribbon, and then I added another cross applique. So you can see there it's actually about 4 layers, 2 of the cotton backing. And here are some of the angels where I put the word in the center as well and just stitched that tag around. I also stitched on with the sewing machine the jute twine bow as well as these little halos made from some gold ribbon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.